January 1, 2013, Times Square, New York City. As the ball drops and a million people scream into the new year, two celebrities share a kiss that will launch 1,000 think pieces. She's 23 years old. Taylor Swift, country music's golden girl, America's sweetheart, the woman with a guitar and cowboy boots who writes songs about teenage heartbreak. He's 18 years old. Harry Styles, the heartthrob from One Direction, the most famous boy band on the planet. The cameras capture everything. The kiss, the smiles, the beginning of what would become one of the most scrutinized relationships in entertainment history. 4 days later, it's over. Swift and Styles break up in the Virgin Islands after a fight that ends with Styles boarding a boat and leaving Swift stranded at the resort. The media has a field day. Entertainment websites gleefully dissect every detail. How many boyfriends has Taylor Swift had now? 6? 7? When will she stop writing breakup songs and find a real relationship? The slut-shaming is relentless. Late-night comedians make jokes about Swift's dating life. Internet comment sections overflow with venom. Even fellow celebrities pile on. Tina Fey and Amy Poehler joke at the Golden Globes that Swift should stay away from Michael J. Fox's son. For the first time in her career, Taylor Swift's carefully cultivated image is cracking. The girl next door narrative that made her famous is becoming a punchline. And the music industry is starting to wonder, has Taylor Swift peaked? Here's what nobody knew. Swift was already planning her escape. From Nashville. From country music. From the image that was suffocating her. She was about to take the biggest risk of her career, abandoning the genre that made her a star to chase a pop dream that everyone said would fail. That gamble would create 1989. The album that sold 1.287 million copies in its first week, spawned 3 #1 singles and won Album of the Year at the Grammy Awards. But it would also turn Taylor Swift into one of the most polarizing figures in pop culture, criticized as calculated, accused of playing the victim, labeled as someone whose squad and feuds overshadowed her music. This is the story of how Taylor Swift reinvented herself and how that reinvention nearly destroyed her. Welcome to the Sound Vault. Every album has a story. This is Taylor Swift's 1989 debut album. To understand why Taylor Swift needed to reinvent herself, you have to understand what it felt like to be the most talked about woman in entertainment, for all the wrong reasons. By early 2013, Swift's romantic life had become a national obsession. Entertainment magazines tracked her every date. Paparazzi stalked her outside restaurants. Gossip websites created slideshows. All of Taylor Swift's ex-boyfriends ranked. The list was growing. Joe Jonas, Taylor Lautner, John Mayer, Jake Gyllenhaal, Connor Kennedy, and now Harry Styles. The double standard was impossible to ignore. Harry Styles dated 9 different people in 2013 alone, and was celebrated as a heartthrob, a charmer, a ladies' man. Taylor Swift dated fewer people over several years, and was called desperate, clingy, a serial dater who couldn't keep a man. Even Styles recognized the hypocrisy. In a December 2013 interview, he said, "It's obviously a shame when anyone gets judged for doing something that seems completely normal to me." But recognizing the double standard didn't stop it. The relationship with Styles had been particularly intense. According to a friend who spoke to Vanity Fair, Styles had chased Swift for a full year. "He wore her down," the friend said. They got together in late 2012, but cracks appeared quickly when Styles was photographed with another woman while on tour in Australia. He texted Swift claiming it was nothing. She tried to believe him. Then came that New Year's trip to the Virgin Islands. Whatever happened there, the details remain private, ended with Styles literally sailing away and Swift left behind. The media portrayed it as another Taylor Swift relationship failure. Another guy who couldn't handle her. Another breakup that would become a song. What the media missed was that Swift was already changing. The pain of the public scrutiny, the exhaustion of defending her personal life, the realization that her America's sweetheart image had become a cage. It was all pushing her toward a decision. She needed to evolve. Not just musically, but personally. She needed to leave behind the wide-eyed country girl who wore sundresses and sang about Romeo and Juliet. She needed to become someone new. And she knew exactly where that transformation would begin. New York City, March 2014. Taylor Swift does something that shocks the country music world. She moves to New York City. Not Nashville, the city that raised her career. Not even Los Angeles, where she could stay close to the industry. New York, the epicenter of fashion, culture, and sophistication. The city that represented everything country music wasn't. The symbolism was impossible to miss. Nashville was acoustic guitars and storytelling. New York was synthesizers and skyscrapers. Nashville was the past. New York was the future Swift was racing toward. She bought a penthouse in Tribeca for $20 million. A glittering fortress in the sky, far from the Nashville suburbs where she'd written her first country songs. The move was strategic. Swift later explained, "I woke up not knowing what I wanted to make, and then one day I started obsessively looking at Tumblr and getting inspiration, and I started making those mood boards and what I wanted the visuals to be. I wanted this album to be sonically cohesive. I wanted the sound to be very authentic, very inspired by 1980s pop." But before she could make that album, she had to convince her label it was the right move, and that wasn't going to be easy. Late 2013, Taylor Swift is on the Red Tour, playing stadium after stadium, watching her country pop crossover album sell millions. By all measures, she's at the peak of her career. But something is nagging at her. Red had been her first real experiment with pop sounds. Songs like "I Knew You Were Trouble" and "We Are Never Getting Back Together" featured electronic production that horrified country purists. Country radio had played those songs, but reluctantly. The Country Music Association was starting to distance themselves from Swift. Industry insiders whispered that she was becoming too pop for country. Swift felt stuck between two worlds. Not country enough for Nashville, not pop enough for mainstream radio. The compromise was killing her creatively. Then she heard an album that changed everything. The Beatles' Rubber Soul. Years later, Swift would describe the revelation. "I was listening to a lot of late 80s pop, and I just remember hearing songs that I wished I had thought to write. I loved melody, I loved hooks, I loved loud drums, but Rubber Soul showed her something else. What a cohesive album could be. Every song belonging together, every track serving the larger artistic vision. Not just a collection of singles with filler, but a complete artistic statement." It was exactly what Swift wanted to create. She began writing immediately. Not country songs with fiddles and banjos. Pop songs, pure, unapologetic, synth-driven pop songs inspired by the 1980s. Songs about New York, about heartbreak and recovery, about being 24 years old and discovering who you really are when nobody's watching. By the time the Red Tour ended in mid-2014, Swift had written dozens of songs. She was ready to record her first official pop album. There was just one problem. Scott Borchetta didn't want her to make it. Picture this moment. Taylor Swift, the biggest artist on Big Machine Records, walks into label president Scott Borchetta's office with her new album. It's the summer of 2014. She's excited, she's confident, she knows she's made something special. Borchetta listens to the album. All 13 tracks of synth pop perfection. Not a fiddle in sight, not a banjo, not a single lyric about pickup trucks or dirt roads. When it's over, Borchetta takes a deep breath. "This is extraordinary," he says. "It's the best album you've ever done." Swift smiles. She knew he'd love it. Then Borchetta drops the bomb. "Can you just give me 3 country songs?" The request hangs in the air. Borchetta wants insurance. Something to send to country radio. Something to keep Nashville happy. Something to hedge their bets in case the pop experiment fails. Swift doesn't hesitate. "Love you, mean it. But this is how it's going to be." It's one of the most important moments of her career, because Scott Borchetta isn't just her label president. He's the man who discovered her, who signed her when she was 14 years old, who built Big Machine Records around her success, who guided her through 4 albums and Grammy wins and multi-platinum sales, and she's telling him no. The tension in that room represents everything at stake. Borchetta has legitimate concerns. Country music made Taylor Swift a star. Country radio played her songs when nobody else would. Country fans bought millions of albums. Walking away from country isn't just a creative risk, it's potentially career suicide. Borchetta had been here before. During the Red era, he'd pushed Swift to work with Swedish pop producers Max Martin and Shellback. Those collaborations created "We Are Never Getting Back Together" and "I Knew You Were Trouble," Swift's biggest pop hits. But they'd also created friction with country radio and country fans who felt betrayed. Now Swift wanted to abandon country entirely. No safety net, no compromise, all pop, all the time. The battle wasn't just about genre, it was about control. For years, Swift had been marketed as the girl-next-door country sweetheart. Big Machine had invested millions in that image. Concert promoters, radio stations, retail partners, everyone expected the next Taylor Swift album to sound like Taylor Swift. But Swift knew something Borchetta didn't. If you chase 2 rabbits, you lose them both. She told Rolling Stone, "I knew exactly what I was doing. If I straddle that line, I'm going to lose both. So I made the decision to make a pop album." After what she later described as a dozen sit-downs, Borchetta relented. They would release 1989 as a pop album. No country songs, no hedging bets, no compromise. But privately, Borchetta was terrified. What if country fans abandoned her? What if pop fans didn't accept her? What if the album flopped? Swift had one more decision to make. Who would help her create this pop revolution? The answer was waiting in Stockholm. If you're going to make a pop album, you call the man who defined modern pop music. Max Martin. By 2014, Martin had produced more #1 hits than anyone except Paul McCartney. His resume read like a greatest hits of the past 2 decades. Backstreet Boys, Britney Spears, Katy Perry, Pink, Ariana Grande. Martin wasn't just a producer, he was a pop scientist. He understood melody and structure in ways that made his songs unavoidable. You might hate yourself for singing along to a Max Martin production, but you'd sing along anyway. Swift had already worked with Martin on Red, creating We Are Never Getting Back Together, I Knew You Were Trouble, and 22. Those tracks had topped pop radio and shown Swift what was possible when she fully embraced electronic production. For 1989, Swift wanted Martin as co-executive producer. She wanted his fingerprints all over the album. She wanted that Swedish pop perfection, the soaring melodies, the massive choruses, the hooks that burrow into your brain and never leave. Recording began in Stockholm at Martin's MXM studios. Swift would fly to Sweden during breaks from the Red Tour, working marathon sessions with Martin and his longtime collaborator Shellback. The chemistry was immediate. Martin later said, "Working with Taylor is easy because she knows exactly what she wants. She's very clear about her vision." But Martin brought something Swift couldn't. Technical mastery. He spent days recording just her vocals, layering harmonies, finding the perfect take for every line. He volunteered to work on tracks he didn't write or produce, simply because he wanted the album to be cohesive. Swift told Billboard, "The more that he did that, the more I realized that he deserved credit for that." He volunteered to record pretty much all the vocals, even things he didn't write or produce. The sessions were intense. Martin and Shellback would program beats, layer synthesizers, construct the sonic architecture of each song. Swift would write melodies and lyrics, often in real time as the track developed. For Shake It Off, they created what Martin called a balance of sweet and salt. The verses were messy and chaotic, multiple instruments competing for attention. Then the chorus exploded with clarity and simplicity. A horn section and that impossible-to-forget chant, "Shake it off, shake it off." The song was deliberately designed to be annoying and infectious simultaneously. You'd hear it and roll your eyes. Then you'd catch yourself humming it 3 days later. Blank Space emerged from a different approach. Martin and Shellback built a minimal, almost menacing production, staccato strings, hollow percussion, and Swift's voice dripping with sarcasm as she played with her media image. The genius of Blank Space was that Swift had finally learned to weaponize the narrative against her. All those articles about her being a serial dater? She'd lean into them. She'd play the psychotic ex-girlfriend in the music video. She'd make the joke before anyone else could. The song's most famous line, "Got a long list of ex-lovers, they'll tell you I'm insane," was Swift reclaiming her story. Yes, she dated people. Yes, she wrote songs about them. And yes, it drove people crazy. But she was done apologizing. 7 of 1989's 13 tracks were produced by Martin and Shellback. Those tracks would become the album's commercial backbone. Shake It Off, Blank Space, Bad Blood, Style, and Wildest Dreams. But Swift had other collaborators too. And one of them would become her most important creative partner. While working with Max Martin gave 1989 its commercial polish, it was Jack Antonoff who brought emotional depth. Antonoff was an unlikely choice for a Taylor Swift album. He was the guitarist for the indie rock band Fun, which had exploded with the hit We Are Tonight. He wasn't a hitmaker like Martin. He didn't have a track record of creating radio smashes. But Swift had worked with Antonoff on the soundtrack song Sweeter Than Fiction in 2013, and something clicked. They shared a mutual obsession with 1980s music, not the glossy pop of Martin's productions, but the emotional vulnerability of the Smiths, The Cure, and New Order. Antonoff's process was completely different from Martin's. Where Martin programmed synthesizers and constructed pop perfection, Antonoff created intimate, emotional moments. For Out of the Woods, Antonoff built a track on Yamaha DX7 and Minimoog Voyager synthesizers. He sent the instrumental to Swift while she was on a plane. Within 30 minutes, she'd written the melody and lyrics. The song was about anxiety, the constant fear that a relationship is one argument away from collapse. The chorus was a mantra. Are we out of the woods yet? repeated over and over, building in intensity until it became almost overwhelming. That emotional rawness became Antonoff's signature. He wasn't interested in radio-friendly polish. He wanted authenticity. He wanted songs that felt like late-night conversations with your best friend. I Wish You Would started with Antonoff sampling the snare drums from Fine Young Cannibals' She Drives Me Crazy. He played the track for Swift on his iPhone. She loved it immediately. The final version retained that lo-fi, demo-like quality, a reminder that great songs don't need expensive production. Antonoff would go on to produce Swift's next 4 albums. He'd become her most trusted collaborator, the person who understood her emotional instincts better than anyone. But it all started with 1989. With those first experiments in making pop music that felt personal and raw instead of calculated and commercial. Swift also brought in other collaborators. Ryan Tedder, the One Republic frontman who'd produced hits for Beyoncé and Adele, helped create the soaring Welcome to New York. Imogen Heap traveled to London to record Clean, the album's emotional climax, in just 2 takes at her hideaway studio. Nathan Chapman, Swift's longtime country producer, co-produced just 1 track, This Love, the only song on 1989 that Swift wrote entirely by herself. The message was clear. This was a new era, a new sound, a new Taylor Swift. By mid-2014, the album was complete. Swift had created something unprecedented in her career, a collection of songs that felt like a cohesive artistic statement rather than a collection of singles. The final step was mastered by Tom Coyne at Sterling Sound Studio in New York City over just 2 days. 1989 was ready. Now Swift just had to convince the world that she was a pop star. August 18, 2014. The top of the Empire State Building. Taylor Swift stands before a camera, about to stream live to millions of fans around the world. The announcement has been teased for weeks. Fans know something big is coming, but they don't know what. Swift wears a sparkly outfit that catches the light. Behind her, New York City spreads out in every direction. The city she now calls home, the city that inspired this album. I woke up every single day that I was recording this record not wanting, but needing, to make a new style of music than I had ever made before, she tells the camera. And for the record, this is my very first documented official pop album. 6 words that change everything. My very first documented official pop album. It's a declaration of war against Nashville, against country music, against everyone who expected her to stay in her lane. Swift continues, I titled the album after my birth year, 1989, as sort of a symbolic rebirth of me as an artist, and the songwriting on this album I did with a lot of my friends who I absolutely adore. She performs Shake It Off for the first time, a deliberately defiant choice. The song is pure pop confection, impossible to categorize as anything but mainstream radio fodder. It's fun, it's catchy, and it's designed to make country music fans realize Taylor Swift isn't coming back. The live stream is viewed by millions. The response is immediate and divided. Swift's fans are ecstatic. They've watched her grow from country teenager to pop superstar, and they're ready to make that journey with her. Country music fans feel betrayed. Social media erupts with accusations. Swift used country music to get famous, then abandoned it for pop money. She's a sellout. She never really loved country. It was all calculated from the beginning. Critics are skeptical. Can a country star really succeed in pop? The genre is crowded with established artists. Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, Beyoncé, these are heavyweight champions. What makes Swift think she belongs in that arena? Even within Swift's own team, there are doubts. Her management worries about alienating country fans. Radio programmers wonder if pop stations will accept her. Retail partners worry about confusing consumers. But Swift has already made her choice. She's betting everything on one belief. Authenticity matters more than genre. I didn't want to break anyone's heart, she told Billboard later. But I knew exactly what I was doing. If I straddle that line, I'm going to lose both. So I made the decision to make a pop album. October 27, 2014, 1989 hits stores. The marketing campaign has been unprecedented. Swift hasn't just promoted an album, she's created a cultural moment. She's done secret sessions, inviting fans to her homes in New York, Nashville, Los Angeles, and Rhode Island to hear the album before release. Hundreds of fans sign non-disclosure agreements, listen to the album in Swift's living room, and keep the secret for weeks. The strategy creates intense loyalty and word-of-mouth buzz. When the album finally releases, those fans become evangelists. Swift has also embraced social media in ways no major artist has before. She's on Tumblr, responding to fans' posts. She's on Twitter, engaging directly with Swifties. She's on Instagram, sharing behind-the-scenes glimpses of her life. The parasocial relationship between Swift and her fans has never been stronger. They don't just love her music. They feel like they know her personally. The album packaging reinforces this. Each CD includes one of 5 sets of 13 random Polaroid pictures, 65 different photos total, showing Swift in various settings, New York backdrops, recording sessions, casual moments. The photos are intentionally imperfect, out of focus, off-framed, with a sepia tint. The 1989 song lyrics are written in black marker at the bottom. It's brilliant marketing. Fans buy multiple copies trying to collect all 65 photos. The Polaroid aesthetic, retro, tangible, physical, fights against the digital streaming era. Polaroid Corporation's CEO later reports that 1989 triggers a revival in instant film photography. Swift has also made a controversial decision. 1989 is not available on Spotify or other free streaming services. She's written an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal arguing that music has value and artists deserve to be paid fairly. The decision is polarizing. Some applaud her for standing up for artists' rights. Others accuse her of being greedy and out of touch. But the strategy works. By forcing fans to buy the album rather than stream it for free, Swift guarantees massive first-week sales. Industry projections are conservative, maybe 600,000 to 900,000 copies in the first week. Those would be solid numbers in an era of declining album sales, but something unprecedented happens. Within 24 hours of release, Billboard raises its prediction to 1 million copies. Within 48 hours, they raise it to 1.2 million. After 6 days, they predict 1.3 million. On November 2, 2014, the numbers come in. 1989 has sold 1.287 million copies in its first week. It's the biggest first-week sales total since 2002. It breaks the SoundScan record for best-selling first week by a female artist. It instantly becomes the best-selling album of 2014. Shake It Off has already hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making Swift the first artist to have a debut single enter at number 1. Blank Space will follow it to number 1 in November, then Bad Blood with Kendrick Lamar will hit number 1 in May 2015. 1989 will spend 11 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard 200. It will eventually sell over 10 million copies worldwide. Taylor Swift has done the impossible. She's successfully crossed from country to pop and become bigger than ever. But the backlash is already building. 2015, Taylor Swift is everywhere. The 1989 World Tour becomes the highest-grossing tour of the year. Swift brings out celebrity guests at nearly every show. Selena Gomez, Lena Dunham, Haim, Ellen DeGeneres, Julia Roberts, Mick Jagger, even her ex-boyfriend's ex-girlfriend, Camilla Bell. She's photographed constantly with her squad, a rotating cast of supermodels and actresses including Karlie Kloss, Gigi Hadid, Cara Delevingne, and Selena Gomez. The photos are everywhere, walking down New York streets, hanging at the beach, attending awards shows. Swift positions herself as a feminist icon. In interviews, she discusses how she's evolved on the issue. As a teenager, I didn't understand that saying you're a feminist is just saying that you hope women and men will have equal rights and equal opportunities. What it seemed to me, the way it was phrased in culture, society, was that you hate men. But critics begin to notice something troubling. Swift's feminism seems performative. Her squad is almost entirely white, wealthy, and conventionally attractive. She speaks about equal rights but rarely addresses systemic issues of race or class. When Nicki Minaj tweets about how black women's bodies are treated differently in the music industry, Swift misinterprets it as a personal attack and responds defensively. The exchange goes viral, and Swift is forced to apologize. Then there's the Kanye West situation. In February 2016, West releases Famous, which includes the line, "I made that bitch famous." Swift's team claims she was blindsided and never approved the lyric. West's wife, Kim Kardashian, later releases recordings showing Swift did know about the line. The incident transforms Swift from victim to villain in many people's eyes. Was she lying? Was she playing the victim again? Was her entire image calculated and fake? Pop culture academic Christy Fairclough observes, her shifting aesthetic and allegiances appear confusing in an overall narrative that presents Taylor Swift as the center of the cultural universe. The media begins to turn on Swift. Articles dissect her friendships. Are they real or just strategic alliances for photo ops? They question her dating history. Is she actually heartbroken, or is she dating people for song material? They analyze her every move for evidence of calculation. Swift's music videos for Blank Space and Bad Blood feature elaborate revenge fantasies that critics read as confirmation that Swift is vindictive and petty. The Bad Blood video, featuring her squad as an army, is seen as a thinly veiled attack on Katy Perry. The feminist who once preached girls supporting girls is now seen as someone who uses feminism as a brand while tearing down other women. Marketing executive Stacey Jones estimates Swift's earned media value at $130 billion. She's literally everywhere, but that omnipresence is starting to feel suffocating. Even her most devoted fans begin to feel Swift fatigue. In November 2016, after the 1989 World Tour ends and the Grammy dust settles, Swift does something uncharacteristic. She announces a hiatus. "I think people might need a break from me," she tells the media. It's a stunning admission. The woman who carefully controlled every aspect of her image is acknowledging what everyone's thinking. We're all exhausted. But the damage goes deeper than overexposure. Swift's next album, Reputation, will be entirely about the backlash, about being labeled a snake, about being cancelled, about rising from the ashes of public opinion. The woman who became the world's biggest pop star discovers that being everywhere means being a target. February 15, 2016, the 58th Grammy Awards. Taylor Swift walks to the stage to accept Album of the Year for 1989. She's the first woman to win Album of the Year twice, the first woman since 2010 to win in this category. At 26 years old, she's at the absolute peak of her career. In her acceptance speech, Swift thanks her collaborators, especially Max Martin, who has deserved to be up here for 25 years. It's a generous moment, giving credit to the producer who helped her make the leap from country to pop. But then Swift does something that will be analyzed and debated for years. She delivers a message that many interpret as aimed at Kanye West, who has been publicly feuding with her. To all the young women out there, Swift says, there are going to be people along the way who will try to undercut your success or take credit for your accomplishments or your fame. But if you just focus on the work and you don't let those people sidetrack you, someday when you get where you're going, you'll look around and you'll know that it was you and the people who love you who put you there. It's meant to be empowering. But to critics, it sounds calculated, self-righteous. Another example of Swift playing the victim while standing at the pinnacle of success. The Grammy win should be the ultimate vindication. Swift took the biggest risk of her career, abandoning country music for pop, and won the industry's highest honor. She proved every doubter wrong. But somehow, the victory feels hollow. Because by February 2016, Taylor Swift has become as famous for her feuds and her squad as she is for her music. 1989 sold over 10 million copies. It spawned 3 #1 singles and 7 top 10 hits. It won Album of the Year and Best Pop Vocal Album. It was the best-selling album of 2014 and the only album to sell over 1 million copies in multiple weeks. By every measurable standard, 1989 was a triumph. Yet the album's legacy is complicated by what came after. The overexposure, the backlash, the sense that Swift had become more interested in maintaining her brand than making music. Max Martin later reflected, she wanted to make a pure pop album, and she did it on her own terms. That takes courage. Jack Antonoff said, people don't realize how radical 1989 was. She walked away from guaranteed success to chase something uncertain. That's what great artists do. But perhaps the most insightful analysis came from music critic Ann Powers, who wrote, Taylor Swift's 1989 represents both the best and worst of modern pop stardom, the ability to completely control your narrative, and the exhaustion that comes from never letting go of that control. The album's influence on pop music is undeniable. 1989 proved that 1980s-inspired synthpop could dominate mainstream radio. It showed that artists could successfully reinvent themselves across genres, and it demonstrated the power of social media and direct fan engagement in the streaming era. Artists who came after, from Carly Rae Jepsen to the 1975 to Olivia Rodrigo, all walked through doors that 1989 opened. The album made it acceptable for pop stars to be earnest, to write confessional lyrics, to embrace nostalgia while sounding modern. 1989 also changed how albums are marketed. The Secret Sessions model, inviting fans into your home to create brand ambassadors, has been copied by dozens of artists. The album's refusal to be on Spotify sparked industry-wide conversations about streaming compensation. The Polaroid packaging inspired a wave of physical album collectibles designed to combat digital listening. Even the criticism Swift faced became influential. Her experience with media overexposure and public backlash would inform how younger artists, like Billie Eilish and Chappelle Roan, approach fame, often choosing to maintain more boundaries and privacy. Swift herself learned from the 1989 era. When she returned with Reputation in 2017, she did almost no press. She let the music speak for itself. She stopped trying to control the narrative and instead leaned into the chaos. And in 2019, when she re-recorded 1989 as part of reclaiming ownership of her masters from Scooter Braun and Scott Borchetta, the album took on new meaning. 1989, Taylor's version, became a statement about artistic ownership and control. Themes that were always present in the original, but now impossible to ignore. Looking back, 1989 wasn't just about Taylor Swift becoming a pop star. It was about a woman taking control of her career, her image, and her art, and discovering that control comes with a price. The album that made her the biggest star in the world also made her the biggest target. The reinvention that liberated her creatively also trapped her in a cycle of overexposure and backlash. Swift later reflected on the 1989 era in her documentary Miss Americana. "I became the person everyone wanted me to be. I was living for approval. And when you do that, you don't realize until later that you're not living for yourself." October 27, 2024. 10 years after 1989 first hit stores, fans are still discovering the album. A new generation of listeners, many born after the album's release, stream Shake It Off and Blank Space on TikTok. The album's legacy has settled into something more nuanced than the hype and backlash of 2014-2016. Critics now recognize 1989 as a landmark pop album. Not perfect, but significant. A moment when an artist bet everything on reinvention and won. The songs have aged remarkably well. Style still sounds modern. Clean still provides emotional catharsis. Wildest Dreams still transports you to a dreamlike state of romantic possibility. And Blank Space, the song where Swift weaponized the media narrative against her, now feels prophetic. She was already aware that fame was a game, that images were constructed, that authenticity itself could be performed. She just didn't realize how exhausting that game would become. The real story of 1989 isn't about country versus pop, or authenticity versus calculation, or even success versus backlash. It's about a woman who looked at the box everyone put her in and decided to build her own. Scott Borchetta begged for 3 country songs. Nashville wanted her to stay loyal. Critics wanted her to fail. Fans wanted her to remain the girl they fell in love with. Taylor Swift said no to all of them. She moved to New York. She worked with Max Martin and Jack Antonoff. She created a pop album that sounded nothing like her previous work. She sold 1.287 million copies in its first week. And yes, the backlash came. The overexposure happened. The criticism was brutal. The image she crafted eventually cracked under its own weight. But here's what matters. She did it anyway. In an industry that demands artists stay in their lane, Taylor Swift swerved into oncoming traffic. She risked everything, her country fanbase, her critical acclaim, her carefully cultivated image, on the belief that she could be whoever she wanted to be. 1989 won 5 Grammys, including Album of the Year. It sold over 10 million copies. It changed pop music. It also nearly destroyed Taylor Swift in the process. Both things are true. Both things matter. And 16 years into her career, with 11 studio albums and dozens of awards, Taylor Swift is still figuring out the balance between control and freedom, between image and authenticity, between the person she presents and the person she actually is. That woman lying on the studio floor, recording Out of the Woods on an airplane, moving to New York to chase a pop dream that everyone said would fail. She created something that will be studied and analyzed for decades. Whether she did it for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, whether the image was authentic or calculated, whether the success was worth the backlash, none of that changes the fact that 1989 is one of the defining pop albums of the 2010s. And the woman who made it proved that sometimes the biggest risk isn't reinventing yourself, it's refusing to apologize for it. This has been the Sound Vault. Every album has a story, and Taylor Swift's, it's still being written.